The tale begins with Princess Yenika of Libany, who has been held captive by the powerful nation of Belcourt. Anxious and eager, she awaits the arrival of Erudian, the king of Belcourt. As Erudian approaches, she greets him warmly and then springs a surprise question. She asks him to marry her. However, Erudian, this damn good-looking guy, immediately turns her down. He explains that he didn't capture her just to become her husband. Now, the reason behind Yenika's unexpected proposal is to prevent Erudian from marrying a lady named Elodia. See, Elodia is a strong contender to be Erudian's fiancé. They're not engaged yet. But Yenika believes that a terrible villain will be born if Erudian marries Elodia. This villain would be nurtured by Elodia's dark magic and would eventually murder Erudian when he reaches the age of 40. However, Yenika can't really spill all this detailed info she knows. She's attempting to win Erudian's affection, but it seems like she's facing quite the uphill battle. In a twist akin to those transmigration stories, Yenika finds herself transported into the very novel she had been reading, and it's set 20 years before the main storyline. Her current mission is to prevent the tragic fate of the novel's villain from unfolding, which means saving herself as well, since she would otherwise succumb to the effects of magic and die within 5 years. The only person capable of helping her is King Erudian, who boasts a divine lineage. However, he flat out rejected her proposition. Alright, let's go back to when Yenika first landed in this novel's world. Yenika found herself in that body approximately 8 months ago. Her scream caught the attention of her supposed sister, Teresia, who hurried in, clearly concerned. That was the moment Yenika met her so-called sister for the very first time, Teresia, who in the novel is the mother of the female protagonist. At that point, Yenika was seriously confused about what was going on. She was essentially a stranger to herself and to the people around her. As she tried to make sense of everything, a knight introduced himself as her personal guard. His name was Fernando Cardona. When Yenika heard the name, it sent a jolt through her. It was as if she'd come across that name somewhere. Then she remembered someone by the name of Cardona, Alexio Cardona to be precise, the male protagonist of the novel she read before. So, the Fernando Cardona in front of her must be Alexio Cardona's father in the future. In a sudden flash of realization, Yenika pieced it together. The novel kicked off with her sister getting kidnapped while she was pregnant. In the land of Riger, a massive neighboring country, Belcourt loomed large and had the potential to easily overpower Libany, the small nation. This eastern powerhouse was a force to be reckoned with. In this tale, it's the formidable king of Belcourt who kidnaps Yenika's elder sister, Teresia, setting off the events of the original story. The novel Yenika now finds herself living in revolves around 3 main characters: Brigitte, the female protagonist, and Teresia's daughter, Alexio, Brigitte's guardian and the male protagonist, and finally, Decalb de Belcourt, the villain. Despite the charming romance brewing between Brigitte and Alexio, there's a backdrop of significant tragedy involving their parents. Duke Levon, Teresia's husband, loses his life while trying to save his wife. Alexio's father suffers the loss of an eye and a leg. Moreover, Teresia, Yenika's beloved sister, meets her end tragically. And right now, Yenika bears witness to all that's to come. It's been 8 months since Yenika got transported into this novel's world. She's determined to do everything in her power to prevent this impending tragedy. She's hatched a plan, let's call it Plan AE, to halt Belcourt from invading Libany. She recalls that Libany rejected some agreement's terms initially, and that clearly infuriated the king of Belcourt. The hitch is, she's clueless about the specifics of that agreement. Enter her guard, Fernando, or as she's affectionately nicknamed him, Ferdy. Seeing Yenika clearly stressed, Ferdy inquires about what might be bothering her. Yenika decides to give it a shot and attempts to extract information from him. So, she asks Ferdy about the agreement between Libany and Belcourt. Ferdy responds with the Gluckman Treaty. Yenika's enthusiasm grows, and she eagerly asks Ferdy for the nitty-gritty details of the Gluckman Treaty. Ferdy goes on to explain that in return for allowing access to the Gluckman Road, Belcourt pledged to supply Libany with magical ore from Ezekian. In other words, it seems that Yenika's own dad, the king of Libany, was the one who initially breached the agreement. Yenika grasps the situation. Her mission is clear: ensure that her father upholds the terms of the treaty. Without wasting any time, Yenika storms into her dad's office, mustering up the courage to straightforwardly ask about the Gluckman Treaty. Whoops! Maybe she was a tad too direct. Turns out, the king of Libany, yep, Yenika's dad, had already taken some steps regarding the treaty. He reveals that he shut down the Gluckman Road for a solid 2 years. Here's the lowdown: Belcourt isn't a source of magical ore itself, but they need it for their capital and to safeguard their borders. So, they heavily depend on trade with Ezekian, a place rich in magical ore. This drove Belcourt, which sits to the east, to fight hard for the rights to use the Gluckman Road, the shortest route to Ezekian. Lately, Ezekian hit the jackpot with a massive discovery of magical ore, leading to a surge in trade between the two countries. With this development, Yenika's father got a bit too greedy. He attempted to tweak the treaty's conditions. You see, the price for letting Belcourt use the Gluckman Road isn't merely a fixed quantity of magical ore anymore. It's a whopping 10% of the total ore traded. For the past 5 decades, Libany had been receiving 100 units of magic ore per payment, but the king is now essentially demanding 1,000 without any prior agreement. And to top it off, the king locked down access for a full 2 years? So, Plana went belly up even before Yenika could kick it off. Not one to be easily discouraged, she's now gearing up for Plan B: put a stop to the king of Belcourt snatching Theresia. But here's the hitch: Yenika hasn't got a clue about the exact timing of Belcourt's invasion. In a bid to work things out, Yenika pays a visit to her childhood buddy, Sergei Levan. You know, Duke Levan's younger sibling. She's cooked up this scheme in her head. Essentially, she wants to make sure Theresia finds a good hiding spot. Just in case everything goes haywire, she needs a backup plan. So, Yenika lays it out for Sergei. When the crunch time arrives, he's got to swoop in and save the day. Although, Sergei's scratching his head because he can't quite catch what she's getting at. But there's one little detail that Yenika seemed to overlook. The king of Belcourt would abduct a princess, and Theresia wasn't the sole princess of Libany. While they're all chilling out during a cozy family tea time in the garden, Yenika begins to feel a gnawing unease, a gut feeling that something's not right. So, she quickly whisks Theresia away, coming up with a solid excuse for their parents. Theresia shouldn't be outside for too long. As they start heading back indoors to the palace, the peaceful scene takes a nosedive into chaos as the first signs of an attack surface. Thinking on her feet, Yenika guides Theresia to a secret spot she'd read about in the novel, urging her sister to hunker down there. She puts on a reassuring smile and tells Theresia to focus on taking care of Brigitte, who's snug in her belly at the moment. With a heartfelt goodbye and a promise to see each other again, Yenika leaves Theresia, who's bewildered and teary-eyed, with no inkling of what's unfolding. Yenika scrambles to find an alternative hiding spot, but the situation keeps deteriorating. The Belcourt knights have managed to breach the palace. Summoning her inner bravery, she readies herself to flee and find cover. Little does she realize someone's been watching her from a distance. Right as she believes she's in the clear, those crimson eyes fixate on her, and she instinctively ducks behind a pillar. She clamps her hand over her mouth, silently pleading in her mind that the person just keeps walking. Sadly, that's not in the cards. The figure approaches, and Yenika, her nerves a bundle of jangled wires, tries to quell her fear. With his shiny silver hair and those piercing red eyes, Erudian, the king of Belcourt, steps into view. And here he is, set on taking Yenika away. But hold up. He just hoists Yenika over his shoulder like she's a sack of potatoes. Seriously? Yenika's quick to complain because his armor is digging into her and causing a real pain. So she's like, "Could you please put me down?" But guess what? Erudian has a different idea. He plops her onto his horse instead, and that's a whole new level of shocking for Yenika. The horse jerks in surprise, almost tipping her over, but Erudian swoops in superhero style, catching her and telling her to lean in against him. And there he goes, all set to head back to Belcourt. Wait, can we just pause and appreciate his handsome face for a second? Now Erudian gets his troops in order and signals them to ride back home. Their route takes them through a magic circle. Covering Yenika's eyes from the blinding magical light, Erudian gives the command to his army to move ahead until they've officially crossed into Belcourt territory. Turns out, Yenika had blacked out, and now she's gradually coming to amidst a cacophony of sounds. Erudian approaches and gently asks if she's awake. This seriously attractive guy is talking to her, and it's enough to practically blow her mind. Erudian, though, seems a bit concerned, probably because Yenika appears completely disoriented. He even questions if something's really off with her and calls for a mage to give her a once-over. As soon as the mage works his magic, Yenika's hit with a wave of nausea. And the moment the mage's hand grazes her head, it's like her head's about to burst. The pain's excruciating, and in her desperation, she reaches out, grabbing at whatever's close. Her hand latches onto something, and almost miraculously, the pain dissipates. It's only then she realizes she's gripping onto Erudian's foot, and he's standing there, looking genuinely concerned for her well-being. Feeling utterly helpless, Yenika somehow manages to choke out that she's okay. Her tears are flowing freely. She's overwhelmed by the sheer sadness that despite all her efforts in the past few months, the odds just haven't been in her favor. Touched by Yenika's emotional state, Erudian reaches out and helps her to her feet. This handsome dude's face is still leaving Yenika starstruck. He gently places Yenika on the ground, plopping down onto Belcourt's flag. As he wipes away Yenika's tears, he apologizes for not realizing that she's sensitive to magic. Yenika's kind of caught off guard because she wasn't aware of any magical sensitivity before this. Since Rolf, the mage, needs more information about Yenika's magical sensitivity, but touching her seems to pose difficulties. That means using another magic circle is pretty much out of the question. So Erudian makes a quick call. Since they've crossed the border, they'll be traveling by horse from this point forward. Knowing that Yenika isn't exactly a pro at riding horses, Erudian steps up and offers her a seat with him. Yenika can't help but marvel at how considerate he is, especially considering the whole kidnapping thing. It's like, is this guy for real? She reaches out and takes Erudian's hand. Then, out of the blue, pops a question. She asks if he's ever thought about sending her back to Liboni. Erudian's momentarily silent, and this has Yenika on the verge of tears. But then he comes through with a reassuring response. He explains that until he's sorted things out with Liboni, he'll make sure she's safe and comfortable. Yenika's finding it a bit hard to believe that the same guy standing before her is the one who's destined to meet a gruesome end by his own son's hands before he even hits 40. It's kind of sad, and she's feeling a familiar weight of responsibility that she once felt for Teresia. Erudian goes on to ask for Yenika's cooperation, though he admits he's aware that it might sound a bit threatening. But here's the thing, Yenika is in the dark about the name of this gorgeous dude standing in front of her. All she's got is that he's Decalb's dad. So, she decides to take the plunge and boldly inquire about his name. Erudian then reveals his full name, Erudian Louis Soldor de Belcourt. Quite the mouthful, huh? In response, Yenika introduces herself with a beaming smile, saying nice to meet you in the friendliest tone. Her smile's so radiant that even Erudian seems taken aback by it. And so, they continue their journey back to their homeland. Yenika is sitting rather rigidly on the horse, with Erudian right there beside her, urging her to loosen up a bit. Easier said than done, right? She can't help but feel self-conscious. Without the armor acting as a buffer, their bodies are just a bit too close for comfort, and she can actually sense the definition of Erudian's muscles through his clothing. Oh, well, props to Erudian for being considerate and ditching the armor after Yenika voiced her discomfort earlier. And all this shyness is just a reminder of why she's been flying solo all her life. But there's this crisp, refreshing scent coming from him that weirdly makes her feel a bit more at ease. It's almost invigorating. Okay, back to the grind. Yenika's kind of surprised to realize she's got quite the thirst going on, and she never even saw it coming. A few hours down the road during a break, Yenika starts feeling that pain again. The weird part? It happened while she was simply watching Rolf conjure up a fire using his magic. Erudian's quick on the uptake and notices that something's up with Yenika. He grabs her hand and pulls her into his arms, trying to comfort her. He's got this suspicion that Yenika might be a bit overly sensitive to magic. Meanwhile, Rolf's there, sniffling and trying to explain, all he did was start a fire, right? Rolf goes on to elaborate that Yenika seems to be one of those rare individuals who can't quite adapt to magic. It's an uncommon phenomenon, but every so often, there are humans who just can't handle magic, either physically or mentally. In essence, it's like Yenika never quite got accustomed to magic in this world where magic is a thing. This also means that Yenika might not exactly belong to this world. Sure, she's in Yenika's body, but she's still someone from wherever she was before she got transported here. But what truly puzzles her is that the pain vanishes the moment Erudian touches her. Not wanting to be a burden any longer, Yenika throws out a suggestion that Erudian should just knock her out. It's the best option she can think of. At least the pain would be short-lived, and she could open her eyes in a comfy bed. Naturally, Erudian shoots down that idea. So she proposes an alternative. They could use a magic circle like they did before. However, Erudian voices his concern about the potential risks if things were to go south. Seeing the resolute look in his eyes, Yenika nervously adds that if things did go wrong, he could just hold her like he did before. Erudian doesn't mince words this time. He emphasizes that he asked for her cooperation, not her sacrifice. After all, he's promised to keep her safe and comfortable. He concludes the discussion by instructing her to stick close to him, as the borders of Belcourt are fortified with magical ore. Yenika's moved by how thoughtful Erudian is being. It hits her that she can't let a guy like him meet an untimely end due to his son using him as a guinea pig for black magic experiments. Erudian takes Yenika under his wing, keeping her close and maintaining a bit of distance from Rolf. After all, Yenika's sensitivity to magic is off the charts. They practically have to shout at each other to have a conversation. Erudian decides to ask Rolf about possible treatments for Yenika's condition. The response isn't too comforting. Rolf reveals that they haven't found a solution yet, but there's this prevailing theory that folks who can't adjust to magic generally don't make it past their 5th year. Yenika might be in a tight spot, although Rolf tries to reassure her by noting that since she's reached adulthood, she should be in the clear. But that's mainly because the original Yenika made it this far. As she mentally tallies up her remaining lifespan, Yenika abruptly stands up. Erudian's quick to try and soothe her nerves, urging Rolf to keep talking. And so Rolf continues, explaining that it's possible Erudian's divine bloodline neutralizes the harmful effects of magic. Yenika racks her brain, trying to recall details from the novel. It dawns on her that Belcourt is the central figure in the Holy Empire because its royal family is directly descended from Loris, the god of peace and prosperity. Talk about Erudian's pedigree, the guy is a genuine descendant of a god. With that divine bloodline, Yenika can feel a sense of security in Erudian's presence, even if he doesn't explicitly tap into his godly powers. So let's lay it down. Yenika hails from another world, which means she's not naturally equipped to handle magic, hence the whole maladjusted to magic thing. But since she might have been baptized, her body had been blessed by Loris. So, as long as she sticks close to someone emanating strong divine energy, she should be in the clear. Plan B had a shot, but Yenika got snatched up instead. Adding to her misfortune, she's essentially feeling useless due to this unexpected sensitivity to magic. Yet here's the kicker. The one destined to rescue her is Erudian, that supporting character slated for a tragic end in the original novel. So Yenika switches gears, hatching Plan C, play matchmaker for the side characters, a win-win strategy. Her game plan involves sticking to Erudian like glue until she figures out how to make peace with this body's magical sensitivity. Not only that, but she's got to stop Erudian from getting off by his son's hands. The catch? Dekalb's son goes dark side thanks to some black magic teachings from his mom. To prevent that, Yenika's got to halt Dekalb's magical education, which means stopping Erudian from tying the knot with that lady in the first place. And yeah, you guessed it, the solution is for Erudian to just marry Yenika instead. And so, Yenika lets her imagination take the reins, envisioning herself tying the knot with this kind and handsome man right in front of her. You know, classic daydream stuff. Her expression gets a little strange, which prompts Erudian to inquire what's cooking in her mind. Without much hesitation, Yenika blurts out that she was basically just thinking that Erudian is quite the looker for a dad. Yeah, you can gauge from the look on Erudian's face what he's likely thinking about her, right? At that very moment, Yenika realizes that her hopes of marriage with him just went poof. As they gear up to head back home, Yenika's still racking her brain for ways to prevent Erudian from tying the knot with the Dark Mage lady. From what she read in the novel, that woman is to blame for Dekalb's spiral into darkness, leading her own son down the treacherous path of black magic. Yenika then starts pondering when Erudian gets hitched, trying to piece together that Dekalb is younger than Brigitte. So that translates to Yenika having about a year's window to dodge all the impending tragedy. Finally, they arrive safe and sound in Belcourt. Out of the blue, Erudian drapes a cape over Yenika, explaining that the scrutiny of the kingdom's attention might be a bit much. Honestly, if it weren't for that cape, Yenika might have been completely overwhelmed. This guy, seriously, he's got a heart of gold. Total husband material. While Erudian lends a hand for her to dismount the horse, Yenika's mind goes off on a tangent. She wonders if she had the chance. Could she possibly kidnap him and make him her hubby? Well, let's be real. That's totally beyond the realm of possibility, but hey, a girl can dream, right? All of a sudden, this lady comes rushing over to Erudian. She's got this long, fiery red hair, and her eyes are all watery as she warmly greets Erudian. You guessed it. That lady is none other than Elodia, the very same lady who's Dekalb's mother in the original novel. Oh, hold up. Yenika's taken aback by how drop-dead gorgeous this so-called evil lady is. But guess what? Erudian's face is as flat as a pancake, and it's pretty clear he's not exactly captivated. Just as Yenika's wrapping her head around the fact that this stunning lady is actually the mastermind behind all the novel's tragedies, her shock is plastered all over her face. Especially when the harsh truth hits her, she's got zero chance of competing with that beauty. A sigh escapes her lips as she figures that if a bombshell like Elodia can't make a dent in Erudian's armor, then what hope does she have to even flirt with the guy? But then, out of nowhere, Elodia's intense glares bore into Yenika. It's like nothing she's ever felt before. Her whole body feels like it's been weighed down, sinking deep, like she's plummeting straight into the underworld. The sensation is overwhelming. She can't even catch her breath. Slumping to the ground, Yenika's desperately trying to stay conscious. Erudian springs into action, rushing to her side with worry etched on his face. Seeing this, Elodia edges closer, that unsettling smile playing on her lips. She drops a question with a grin, asking Erudian why he'd bring someone tainted by the dam to this place. Here's the kicker, that feeling Yenika just experienced? Elodia definitely took a stab at ending her with some dark magic. Invisible hands of the dam capable of yanking a living person right down to the underworld. That's exactly how Decalb's magic went down in the novel. Erudian doesn't hold back and puts Elodia in her place, telling her off for being disrespectful to a foreign nation's royalty. He makes it clear that she's making him look bad. Elodia backtracks with an apology and extends an invitation for Yenika to check out the quarters. Hell no! Yenika's not budging an inch to follow her anywhere. And then, out of nowhere, Yenika collapses to the ground, reaching out to Erudian for help. Quick on his feet, Erudian scoops her up and carries her. You know what? It's playing right into Yenika's plan. After dispatching his knights to take a breather, Erudian essentially tells Elodia to hit the road as well. She might not be too thrilled about it, but there's not much she can do. On their stroll toward the palace, Erudian turns to Yenika and drops a truth bomb. She's pretty lousy at keeping things under wraps. He goes as far as to say that when she fell for the second time, it was probably a fake out. Yenika's desperately avoiding his gaze, but eventually caves in. She confesses that Elodia genuinely scares the daylights out of her. Erudian sheds some light on the matter. Elodia holds the second highest rank at the Tower of Magic, right under Rolf, the numero uno mage. Her power has played a significant role in the country's development. Black magic is a big no-no on the whole Ryder continent, so folks tend to keep it hush-hush. There's this flavor of dark magic that's all about snatching souls, trying to head back to the big guy upstairs, and then turning bodies into puppets. If someone's caught dabbling in this creepy stuff, it's basically a one-way ticket to the executioner's block. No exceptions. That's why the whole black magic deal gets passed down on the down low. Teacher teaches student, and then that student takes on their own students, and so on. Plus, the kicker is that Elodia is holding down the second slot in the Tower of Magic's pecking order. Just that fact alone sends a cold shiver right down Yenika's spine. This lady is not to be trifled with. Erudian steps up to the plate with some reassuring words for Yenika. He lays it out that Elodia won't be strolling into the palace whenever she pleases, like she did today. That gesture totally tugs at Yenika's heartstrings. And whoops! She almost got snagged by that good-looking face of his. Hey, who wouldn't? As Yenika steps into the Barilia Palace, a place custom-made for her stay, it's a total match with how the novel painted it. And wouldn't you know it, she recognizes one of the maids, Marianne, despite Yenika never actually meeting her before. This Marianne lady was the cream of the crop when it came to taking care of Teresia in the original novel. It's a strange sensation, to say the least. As Yenika gets herself comfortable in her new digs, there's a knock on the door out of the blue. Lo and behold, Erudian's there, dropping in to make sure everything's to her liking. And guess what? Yenika slips up and calls him Decalb's dad by mistake. This prompts Erudian to question why she's throwing that title around. But there's no way Yenika's going to spill all her secrets, so she apologizes and promises to knock it off. Before Erudian leaves her to get some rest, he lays it out that she's a VIP in Belcourt, and he's all ears if she needs anything. The way he's bending over backward to be considerate totally sends Yenika's heart aflutter. Just as Erudian's about to make his exit, Yenika grabs onto his attire and throws a curveball of a question at him. She's all curious about his potential marriage to Elodia. Erudian seems a bit uncertain as he answers, admitting that it's probably on the horizon since Elodia's got the whole queenly vibe going on. But deep down, Yenika's burning to spill about everything she knows. Problem is, she's got zero evidence to back any of it up. And even if she reveals about Elodia's black magic gig, chances are Erudian's not going to take her word for it. So her best shot is to build up her own credibility in his eyes, so he trusts her more than he trusts Elodia. In a gentle move, Erudian disentangles Yenika's hand from his clothes and drops a nugget of advice. She needs to be more on the cautious side. Erudian then tells Yenika not to cling to a guy who willingly walks away. Seeing this as her chance to make her move, Yenika suddenly spills her feelings to Erudian. She's hoping her looks will do the trick. But Erudian sees right through it, telling Yenika not to play games. He says he's pretty sharp when it comes to noticing things. Yenika pouts. Can't believe what she's hearing, since Erudian has no clue how sneaky the woman he trusts really is. Once Erudian walks away, Yenika can't stop herself from eyeing his departure through the window. She's dead set on going for Plan C, flirting with the villain's dad. With Yenika's intense gaze heating up his back, Erudian can't resist sneaking a few peeks in her direction. It's almost like he's thinking, Yenika, you're one interesting woman. Erudian never meant to harm anyone he kidnapped, and invading Libany or causing bloodshed was the last thing on his mind. The attack was supposed to be a wake-up call, a reminder that their arrogance and greed had gone too far. He thought that personally intervening as the king of Belcourt would send a strong and clear message. That's why he handpicked his best team for a precise guerrilla attack and ordered them to minimize damage. Erudian believed it was just a matter of time until Libany would reopen Gluckman Road. But now, he can't shake the feeling that he's gotten himself into something quite troublesome, a hostage who's not used to magic. He's uneasy about capturing Princess Yenika, as she did nothing wrong, yet now she's also in a bad state. Erudian goes as far as telling his knight to clear out anything that might have magic within a 500-yard radius of Barilia Palace, where Yenika is staying. It makes him wonder if he's being overly lenient because Yenika's so darn cute. He didn't expect her to play sick in front of Elodia. All of a sudden, Erudian tells the knight to put a stop to Elodia entering the palace grounds without prior permission. Up until now, Erudian didn't pay much attention to Elodia because she helped deflect the interest of noblewomen in his court. But now, he's got a very important guest to protect, and he can't let Elodia waltz in whenever she pleases. Yenika's maid, Marianne, hears that Yenika is sensitive to magic, and she gets worried about her. But Yenika assures her that she's perfectly fine. Then, Marianne excitedly tells Yenika that they have removed all the magical stuff from around Barilia Palace, within 500 yards. She asks Yenika if she wants to go for a walk, and Yenika is super pumped about it. As they walk around, there are these markers showing where it's safe for Yenika. But Yenika still feels kind of stuck. Marianne tells her that the king has ordered them to let him know if Yenika wants to leave that area. Yenika instantly thinks that Erudian would come to see her himself if she did. So, without thinking twice, Yenika tells Marianne that she wants to go beyond the garden. Well, surprise. It isn't Erudian who shows up to escort her, but a priest assigned by the king. Yenika ends up chatting with the priest, Thierry, and gets a bunch of info about where Erudian hangs out. That gets her thinking about Erudian's relationship with Elodia. Thierry kind of hesitates but says they aren't officially engaged, though there are talks about making Elodia the next queen. They've been discussing it for 5 years, and Elodia is pretty excited about it. That info boosts Yenika's confidence, which means they're not officially engaged yet. But the whole idea of Elodia being a strategic match for Erudian doesn't bring Yenika down. She's determined to carry out her plan and get closer to Erudian. So, from that day on, she makes the central garden in front of the king's residence her base of operations. So, based on the stuff Thierry spilled earlier, Yenika figures she can finally meet Erudian. But after 4 days of waiting and wandering around the palace garden, there's no sign of Erudian showing up. Now she's all sulky, thinking maybe she's been too clingy. She's wondering if she's just not Erudian's type, picturing how perfect Erudian and Elodia would be together. If she tries to squeeze in there, it'd be like changing the whole story. But that doesn't get Yenika down. In fact, it just makes her more determined. The next day, it's the 5th day of her Erudian waiting marathon. She's got a plan this time, thinking that if Erudian still doesn't show up in the garden, she'll accept that he's crazy busy. It's like a battle of Erudian's unbreakable fortress versus Yenika's stubbornness. Let's see who wins this showdown. It's already 2 p.m. and Erudian glances at the garden, spotting Yenika in her hiding spot. He thought she'd eventually give up if he didn't show, but it's day 5, and if he ignores her now, she's definitely not going anywhere. What's more, it's bugging him because she's practically hiding in plain sight. He's now regretting letting her have access to the royal garden. The problem is, he never saw Yenika being such a distraction. While he's pondering what Yenika's been up to these past days, he suddenly wonders if he should give in. And in that moment, it hits him that he might actually be interested in her after all. Erudian grew up as an only child, and from a young age, he was used to a peaceful and quiet life. His daily routine was all about following rules. There weren't many things that bothered him, but recently, Leibni's attitude was really getting on his nerves. And then there was this woman who was an even bigger, ongoing annoyance. She was the one running the show in the Magic Tower, the self-appointed fiancé, Solea Elodia. She played the part of the loving fiancé perfectly, acting like she adored him more than anything in the world. But Erudian could see through her sometimes, realizing that Elodia could turn on him at any moment. He can't help but wonder about Elodia's charming facade and what she really wants. So he has to stay on his toes and be cautious around her. She is one of the biggest disruptions to his peaceful and quiet life. Compared to that sneaky woman, Yenika is like an open book. Even though she disrupts Erudian's daily life just as much, it feels different from Elodia. Yenika doesn't particularly annoy or bother him. If Yenika's goal is to get Erudian's attention, she succeeded in just 5 days, something Elodia has failed at despite trying for 5 years. Meanwhile, Yenika starts to feel frustrated, worried that her energy is draining every day. All she needs is to see Erudian to feel refreshed again. Suddenly, she hears her name being called. It's Erudian, standing right in front of her, asking what she's up to. Without wasting any time, Yenika rushes to him and tries to grab his hand. In an instant, she feels recharged, like her energy has been topped up. Erudian pulls her hand and he carries her in his arms. Seizing the moment, Yenika embraces him. Erudian guides Yenika to sit down, but she still won't let go of his shoulder. There's this particular scent around Erudian that Yenika wishes she could bottle up. Then, she'd never feel sick no matter where she went. Finally, Yenika reluctantly releases him when Erudian asks to see her face. As he places his hand on her forehead, he inquires if Thierry hasn't been of much help. Yenika clarifies that Thierry is nothing like Erudian since all it takes is Erudian holding her hand once. After some back-and-forth debates and arguments, Yenika proposes that he meets her at least once every 2 days to recharge her energy. Erudian finally agrees but suggests it should be once every 4 days, at the same time, for 30 minutes. He assures her that he can commit to that much. Then he drops a bombshell. If he can't make it, he tells Yenika not to hide in strange spots like she did today. This catches Yenika off guard, realizing that Erudian had been avoiding her on purpose. And from that day onward, Yenika makes her way to the garden once every 4 days. Just holding Erudian's hand is like a magic cure that wipes away all her tiredness. This guy can heal just by being there. Even though Yenika only get to see him twice a week, it's better than not seeing him at all. Then, out of the blue, Erudian asks Yenika to write a letter to Leibni. He explains that he hadn't even considered it, but her father threatened to tear down Gluckman Road unless he receives a handwritten letter from Yenika. Yenika's past life parents passed away when she was young, so she doesn't know much about being a dutiful daughter. But now, she is the youngest daughter of the king and queen of Leibni and cherished as the baby of the family. How on earth has she completely forgotten about Leibni? Feeling guilty toward her parents and Erudian, who's been looking out for her in Belcourt, Yenika finally sits down to write a letter to Libany, assuring them that she's doing fine. But then Erudian surprises her by saying she can write whatever she wants since he won't be checking it. So she comes up with a clever idea to reassure her father in hopes that he'll prolong discussions about Gluckman Road, giving her more time there. Erudian starts feeling uneasy when he sees the expression on Yenika's face. So he offers to read the letter once she's finished because her sudden change in demeanor makes him nervous. However, in the end, Erudian doesn't actually check the letter. He doesn't even open it. Yenika feels a pang of regret since she didn't mention anything about the treaty, thinking that Erudian would be reading it. Yenika worries about what might happen if her father actually opens Gluckman Road and then Erudian sends her packing back to Libany. She can't allow that to occur because going back to Libany means she'll meet an untimely demise within 5 years and Erudian will end up marrying a black mage. She's already done her best to reassure her father with her letter, so she's hoping he takes that as a hint to hold off as long as possible. Observing Yenika's expression, Erudian remarks that sometimes she's a tough nut to crack. He can't quite tell if she wants to return to Libany or not. Suddenly, she has an epiphany and asks him what if she says she prefers Belcourt over Libany. She wonders if she could come up with a good enough reason. Maybe he'll let her stay. But Erudian never lets his guard down. He advises her not to attempt any clever tricks since she has no connections here, and her body even rejects the very land. So, what good would it do for her to stay? Yenika's quite used to handling Erudian's rejections, and besides, she still has some time left here. When she thinks about it, Erudian mentioned giving her 30 minutes of his time, but today it feels like it's already been longer. So, Yenika decides to push her luck and asks if Erudian could spare her more time and hold her a bit longer. However, he doesn't fall for that trick again. He puts on a smile and sends some divine energy the way the priest does it. The fun fact, Erudian can pass on divine energy through direct contact without any rituals or effort, while the priest has to intentionally send their divine energy. After that, he tells Yenika not to provoke him with words like that, leaving her wondering what he means. But then, out of the blue, Erudian stands up, his expression changes, and he informs Yenika that it might be best for her to stay in Berillia tomorrow. He explains that Elodia will be visiting the royal palace. In her room, Yenika just can't shake this nagging feeling, knowing that Elodia is going to visit Erudian tomorrow. Marianne, sensing Yenika's unease, can't resist asking if something's on her mind. Marianne then hands Yenika a soothing cup of warm milk to help her relax. As Yenika sips her milk, she starts musing about Elodia's real motive for marrying a man who's the complete opposite of her. It reminds Yenika of that book she read, where Elodia told Decalb that he was this bizarre mix of the most potent divine power and the darkest magic, capable of having it all, even the distant realm of the gods beyond the Udeta. It makes Yenika wonder if Elodia's aiming to peek beyond the Udeta, which is basically the boundary between heaven and earth. It's almost like Elodia wants to conquer the godly realm through some shady magic, and if she thought she could do it through her son, that would explain everything. But then, based on what Yenika recalls from the book, that eerie experiment ultimately backfires because Decalb loses his divine nature when he dabbles in black magic. Yenika can't help but wonder if there's a hidden agenda at play here. So, Yenika's left with just a couple of choices here. 1. She could do everything in her power to disrupt things whenever Elodia and Erudian are together. Or 2. She might have to willingly put herself on the line to prove that Elodia is into some dark magic stuff. But here's the twist. If she tries to get in their way and Elodia uses black magic to harm her, then Elodia is going to be caught red-handed practicing that shady magic. Yenika's sacrifice would save Erudian from an early demise. But let's be real, that's a terrible ending if Yenika ends up kicking the bucket. After all, she's doing all of this to stay alive. So she figures she'll just act like her usual self tomorrow. The next day, Erudian's all set to meet up with Elodia. It's been a good 3 weeks since he last laid eyes on her. He kinda wishes she could just give him the scoop on the magic tower and call it a day. By the way, Elodia's the mage responsible for keeping him in the loop about what's going on with the magic tower. Even though Erudian doesn't fully trust her, she's still a darn good magician, and she's like the crown's connection to the whole magic tower deal. He starts thinking, maybe if nothing crazy happens, Elodia could be his lifelong buddy. But then again, that means he'd have to spend his days constantly watching his own queen like a hawk, and just thinking about it makes him tired. Out of the blue, as he's heading over, he catches sight of something outside the window. Well, what do you know? Yenika's just lounging there all cool, patiently waiting for him, not even bothering to hear what Erudian said earlier. When she notices Erudian looking her way, she flashes him a megawatt smile, then dashes closer to the window. She's like, "Hey, can you pop that window open?" And she's positively thrilled when Erudian caves into her stubbornness. Erudian can't resist giving in to her persistence. Yenika fancies herself as someone who's hard to predict, and for some reason, Erudian is taken aback by how Yenika looks today. She appears more delicate than usual. So he casually asks Yenika what's brought her to his neck of the woods. Yenika, with a big grin, announces that she's planning to snatch him away. Hearing this, Erudian chuckles and asks her what's got her feeling so down today that she'd resort to kidnapping. Yenika explains that she's been toying with the idea of messing up his plans for the day. Straight up, Yenika points out that since he's not officially tied to Elodia, they're both in the same boat. She wants to know if he's in for a little adventure with her. Suddenly, without missing a beat, Erudian hops out the window, still smiling, and playfully asks Yenika what exactly she's got in mind once she's got him in her clutches. This leaves Yenika stunned. She can't believe she managed to rope him into this. Since it's a bit beyond her initial plan, she hesitates for a moment, then suggests they make a run for it together. Yenika can't help but think that Erudian's oddly cooperative today, making her wonder if he's just going along with her for the fun of it. Out of the blue, Yenika turns to Erudian and says that someday he'll owe her one. With a grin, Erudian responds, "Maybe one day I will. You never know what the future holds." But they better pick up the pace before Elodia catches them. Suddenly, Erudian stops dead in his tracks and grabs Yenika's hand as they spot Elodia right in front of the Berilia Palace. What on earth is Elodia doing there anyway? Having Elodia right in front of Berilia Palace is a major issue. So, Erudian suggests to Yenika, "Let's take a walk around the city instead." And Yenika quickly agrees, as long as they can stay far away from Elodia. As Elodia attempts to approach Berilia Palace, Theric, Erudian's knight, stops her and informs her that Erudian personally ordered that nobody can enter. Before leaving, she secretly casts some black magic on the palace, making sure nobody notices. She knows Erudian is suspicious of her, and it would be a big problem if he turned against her. Since Erudian possesses strong divine powers, Elodia wants to ensure she's the only woman he can marry. Out of the blue, Elodia asks Theric how Erudian found out she was there. But Theric explains he spotted her and decided to warn her since the area was off limits. Elodia looks around and doesn't sense anything unusual. Just so you know, divinity and black magic are like opposites that cancel each other out. Yet they can coexist in the same world without clashing. She can't sense Erudian's presence, so she figures he can't detect her either. Watching Erudian, Yenika finds it weird how distant he seems towards someone he's supposedly thinking of making his fiancé. It makes her think he's way more cautious of Elodia than she initially thought. She starts wondering if the offer to explore the city is Erudian's way of getting away from Elodia. Just before they head out, Erudian asks his knight to fetch something. It turns out to be a robe that he wraps around Yenika himself. Yenika wonders why he's doing this, thinking that it's probably because it wouldn't be safe for a girl like her to wander the streets in such an obviously expensive dress. But then, as she looks at Erudian, who's even more dazzling, she quickly drapes the robe around him too. Even though Yenika's plan kind of goes off track, this date is turning out much better than she expected. She believes that as long as she's with Erudian, nothing bad can happen, and she feels fearless as long as he's by her side. The horse is ready, and Erudian offers his hand to help her onto the horse. And that's how Yenika finally gets to leave the palace for the first time since she arrived at Belcourt. When they reach the capital city, Yenika can't help but glance around, and she gets this feeling that people are checking her out. Erudian notices and tugs her hoodie, telling her it's better not to reveal her face too much to avoid attention. He decides to dismount from the horse and helps Yenika down, saying they'll continue on foot. Yenika can't shake the guilt of making him walk around without his guards, as if he has to show her the city like this. Seeing her remorseful look, Erudian reassures her that he needed to inspect the capital anyway, so she shouldn't feel down. Yenika can't help but wonder if Erudian can read her thoughts sometimes, even though she can't quite figure him out. He can be so kind and thoughtful, but then he'll suddenly turn cold and distant. It's like he lures her in with kindness, only to throw up a wall around himself. She wonders how she can resist when he's got a face like that. She needs to calm her racing heart. Yenika thanks Erudian in advance for being her protector for the day, and promises to make the most of their outing. Erudian extends his hand, inviting her to hold it. As Yenika takes Erudian's hand, it's like she just chugged a double espresso. She worries she might AD on his divine energy. As they wander around, Erudian plays the role of a tour guide, sharing information about the various places they visit. Eventually, they arrive at the famous Yugal Plaza. Erudian warns Yenika not to wander off on her own, and she senses he's a bit more on edge than usual. Erudian then asks if she's heard of Yugal Plaza, and she mentions that Theory recommended it to her. When Yenika brings up Theory, Erudian remarks that it seems like she and Theory have gotten close. He lets out a sigh and asks if Theory lets her call him by his name. Suddenly, Yenika questions if he's feeling jealous. Did Yenika manage to win Erudian's heart yet? By the way, what's the secret sauce Elodia used on Yenika's palace? If you want more juicy details, don't forget to smash that like button and drop a comment below. Thanks for hanging out with us. Hope you had a fantastic time.